Rabbi Lauren Werber, and it is a sad moment, but also a tremendous honor to try to memorialize John in the best way all of us can. A death has occurred, and everything is changed by this event. We are painfully aware that life can never be the same, that yesterday is over, that relationships once rich have ended. But there is another way to look upon this truth. If life went on the same without the presence of the one who had died, we could only conclude that the life we here remember made no contribution, filled no space, meant nothing. The fact that John left behind a place that cannot be filled is the highest tribute to him. Life can be the same after a trinket has been lost, but never the same after the loss of a treasure. Today, we grieve for a true treasure. Today, we remember a small, thin giant of a man. Today, we try to compress the essence of a man overflowing with personality, goodness, humor, and wisdom into something we can hold in our hearts. Today, we are angry. Why did he suffer? And why did he die too soon? But today, we are grateful. We, all of us, we won the lottery by knowing John, and we are thankful that he is now at rest. Today we are afraid. What will tomorrow and the tomorrow after that look like without someone who was so present to us? But today we are hopeful. We know his memory and the gifts he shared with us will continue to guide us. Today, as we send love and care and compassion to Sydney, to Michael and Gigi, to Elaine, Tom, and Aaron, to Cheryl, Don, Jake, Sarah, and Leah, we look to tradition and to modern wisdom for comfort. You'll notice that despite our deep grief and our sense of loss, the tone of the readings today will be of joy and of gratitude. They reflect as honestly and as accurately as possible what I am absolutely sure John wanted. We begin with words of hope from Psalm 15. Adonai mi yagor ba'ohalecha mi yishkon bahar kodshecha, holech tamim ufoel tzedek v'dover emet bilvavo. Adonai, who may abide in your house? Who may dwell in your holy mountain? Those who are upright, who do justly, who speak the truth within their hearts, who do not slander others or wrong them or bring shame upon them, who give their word and come what may, do not retract, who do not exploit others, who do not take bribes. Those who live in this way shall never be shaken. These are words I could imagine John saying to us. I'd like the memory of me to be a happy one. I'd like to leave an afterglow of smiles when life is done. I'd like to leave an echo whispering softly down the ways of happy times and laughing times and bright and sunny days. I'd like the tears of those who grieve to dry before the sun of happy memories that I leave when life is done. To share some of those memories, we invite one of John's friends, Al Sussman, to say a few words.
John was my friend. I met John and Sydney before we moved to Ohio, and I singled them out. When I returned to New York, I told my wife, Freda, that I had just met our new Ohio friends. John and I became close business colleagues when we moved here in 1989. At meetings and conventions, John and I would break away from the group, discuss names and phone numbers he had on his ever-present yellow sheet. That was his database for candidates and assignments. Or we just would hang out because John was my friend. Even years ago, when we took a trip to tour the Ford Motor assembly plants in Dearborn, Michigan, and more recently when he came to Tucson to visit me, he could not be more agreeable, cooperative, helpful. His positive attitude was therapeutic for me because John was my friend. When we'd have our 2 to 3 hour weekly lunches discussing family, finance, past history, and current events, I would ask, "How are you doing?" His reply was always, "Good." He expressed his gratitude for all the efforts his doctors were taking to extend his life. He never let his health condition be a negative aspect to our relationship because John was my friend. I will miss our weekly lunches, our many conversations, the relaxation he provided by his agreeable, cooperative, and positive nature, because John will always be remembered as my friend.
Thanks, Al. Thank you, Al. And to say a few more words, Rich Kelman.
Good morning. First of all, to Sydney and Elaine and Cheryl, Ann and I are deeply sorry for your loss. This has been a loss to all of us. My name is Rich Kelman from Buffalo, New York. My wife, Ann, and I met John and Sydney in Buffalo, I'd say about 40 years ago, something like that, Sydney. A long, long time ago, almost a half century. We lived there then, we still do. It's been 43 years for us. He was diminutive, but his voice was huge. And he was hysterically funny. I may tell you one of his jokes before we finish, but I'm not sure. I'm looking at the kids, and I'm not sure it's appropriate. But I must say this, we became fast friends. We loved being with each other. And we found that I found he was the most vivid person I've ever known. Vivid meaning almost three-dimensional. He just jumped out at you. His voice was powerful, although it wasn't loud. You could just understand what he was saying, and you laughed along with him. It was a joy to be with them. I think in another life, he could have been a stand-up comic. He admitted he was cheap, and he was a tough business guy, so he could have been Jack Benny. But I realized that at one of the girls' weddings, either Elaine's or Cheryl's, I don't remember which, but he played the MC. I was so startled and pleased to see how funny and witty he really was. And through our years together, John told stories. Sydney was his audience, and she would sit there stone-faced, waiting for the punchline, and then would break out in gales of laughter, as we all did, because John, again, was so witty and so funny that you couldn't help but be joyful when you were with him. John brought joy and laughter and a love of life to our friendship, and how we'll miss him. It seems to me that people do live on in memory, as the rabbi mentioned, in our hearts and minds, in the stories we tell each other about their lives, and in the goodness they bring to us during their lifetimes. Most of all, I'll remember John's courage. He was a realist. He understood and accepted the medical challenge he faced. It was around 10 years ago, as I recall, when he told me, he knew this long before the end of his journey. He told me 10 years ago, he said, "This is going to be very, very tough." And sure enough, it was. He expected a long and difficult fight to survive. And with Sydney by his side, he went through bouts of chemo and experimental procedures, The medical team came up with creative approaches. And through it all, John remained brave and stalwart. And if not optimistic, I don't think he ever lost hope. He will remain an inspiration to me for the rest of my life. Just one final anecdote that we all went, John and Sydney and Ann and I went to Chautauqua Institution one summer. If you're familiar with that, it's a 750-acre campus on Lake Chautauqua, south of Buffalo, near Jamestown. And it's a gorgeous place. And at night, because there are no city lights there, the stars were just, they were strewn across the sky. They were gorgeous, like a painting. And we all stood there and just looked up at the stars. And we all were just touched by awe, that sense of wonder. My sister has an expression for that, and she talks about special moments that you remember all your life because it touches both your mind and your heart. And we looked at that and we were just struck silent. And it was 10 o'clock at night, and other campers, if you will, were asleep by that time because they had an early morning at Chautauqua. And the silence was beautiful. The clarity of the stars were gorgeous. And John started picking out planets that he thought he saw. He said, yeah, there's Mars. And he looked over there and he said, yeah, there's Uranus. I said, really? I said, I haven't looked lately, so I don't know. But we both laughed. And then Sydney and Ann broke out in laughter. We had this loud laughter that was bouncing all off the walls of the cabins all over the campus and across the lake. And I will always remember that because he took a sense of holiness and awe and mixed in with it humor, which was John. He will remain in my memory. As I say, he'll live forever with me, and I know with my wife, Ann, and Sydney. I hope we can go back to Chautauqua sometime and tell some stories.
Thank you. Beautiful words. We can and will shed tears that he is gone, but we can and must also smile because he lived. We can close our eyes and pray that he will come back, but we can also open our eyes and see all that he has left. Our hearts can be empty because we can't see him, but we can also be full of love that was shared. We can turn our backs on tomorrow and live yesterday, but we can also be happy for tomorrow because of yesterday. We can remember him and only that he is gone, but we can also cherish his memory and let it live on. We can cry and close our minds, be empty and turn our backs, but we can also do what he would want: smile, laugh, open our eyes, and love. We've heard from two friends of John's. We invite one more dear friend, Glenn Berenger.
Thank you, Rabbi. Good morning. My name is Glenn Derringer, and my wife Marion and I are very fortunate people. We are probably two of the oldest friends of John and Sydney. We met in the very early 70s when both our families moved to a little shtetl about 72 miles northwest of Chicago. It was called DeKalb, Illinois. Again, we were both married only a few years at the time, and both families moved to a city that was no larger than 30,000 people. There were approximately 60 Jewish families of all sorts: conservative, reformed, Orthodox, agnostic, you name it, we had it. And we all prayed in the same place at the same time. Little did we know, Marion and myself, that that friendship that we formed in those early years would last more than 46 years. Today we are here to celebrate the life of John Brunschwig. Over the past 46 years, John and I had a very special relationship. I am honored to be able to tell you just a little bit of what I knew about John. John joined the motor division of General Electric, and I joined the Wurlitzer Company, maker of pianos and organs, when we were in DeKalb. While DeKalb was a university town, there was, and according to people still living there, nothing to do in DeKalb. Last time I saw John, he told me to spice it up a little bit, so I'm trying to do that. John used to make a joke. You know, as everyone has told you, he was a real jokester. So he made a joke and he said, on Saturday nights, to have fun in DeKalb, you go down to Penny's and try on gloves. That was John. But the Brunschwigs and the Derringers had more fun than you can imagine. Just being together was fun. You see, John and I were handymen. We were, how would you say it? I guess you could say we were really fixer-uppers. Just being together, we did some crazy things. For example, John and I installed a new sink, remember, Sydney? In the Brunschwig's bathroom. I told John, I was on the floor underneath the sink, and I told John I needed a ruler to measure a certain length. John, being the engineer he was, brought me a micrometer. And I looked at John and I said, John, I'm not measuring millimeters, I'm measuring inches. So John laughed and gave me this look, and then he gave me a ruler. John helped me put in a barbecue gas grill on my porch. And no need to tell you that we both had moments where after we turned on the gas, we ran behind the house as far as we could to make sure that no one blew anything up. Okay. Sydney always thought I was a bit crazy because I was a gadget man. And I love gadgets and new products. The great thing was that I introduced John to all the new things he obtained in the early 70s. For example, I taught John how to use a blow dryer to give lift to his thinning hair. Eventually, we both just shaved it all off, and that was it. The really funny thing, and John always told me this, every time he'd go out to dinner and he would put his credit card on the table, he would say, you introduced me to credit cards. Because before John and I became friends, John never used a credit card. And it got to a point where when I bought a gadget, I purchased two. One for me and one for my friend John. I can only tell you that John was a man among men. He was a husband among husbands. He was a father among fathers. He was a brother among brothers. He was a grandpop among grandfathers. And he was a friend among friends. He was my friend. And I shall never, ever forget. We loved each other as friends. And John, may you dwell in the house of the Lord forever, my dearest, dearest friend. Amen.
Thank you. Sounded just like John. In times of sadness for a very long time, our tradition has turned to the 23rd Psalm as a psalm of comfort, a psalm of hope. I'll share a little bit of the Hebrew of the 23rd Psalm, and then for those of you who know it, we will say together the traditional English to bring ourselves comfort and to remember John. Adonai roi lo exar, bino deshe yarbitzeni, almei menuchot yanahaleni, nafshi yeshovev, yancheni v'maglei tzedech l'man shemo. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. A couple of years ago, I gave a Rosh Hashanah sermon about two types of people, rebounders and wallowers. The idea was to be a rebounder, a person who grows from challenges and makes the most of what he or she has. At lunch after the service, we always ate lunch together after Rosh Hashanah morning services, with John 8 years into his disease. He lifted his hands in the air and really loudly declared in classic John style, "Well, I'm a wallower. I'm definitely a wallower." My family and I still laugh at this moment. But part of what makes it so funny is that nothing in the world is further from the truth. John had a self-deprecating sense of humor, and often for effect, he played the part of the wallower. Even when healthy, his daughter said he would frequently declare, "I'll just suffer in silence." But at heart, he was a rebounder extraordinaire, a man who celebrated life. A few months ago, John and I went to lunch. I asked him how he's coping with knowing that he has very little time left. And he answered very simply. He said, "If you think too much about dying, you forget to live." Just a few weeks ago in the hospital, he repeated the sentiment. He said to me, "You remember what I said. If you think too much about dying, you forget to live." His plan, perfectly executed, was to live. John remembered to live, and to live his way throughout his life. After growing up in Queens, the first in his family born in the United States and not in France, and earning a degree in engineering, John held several jobs in lots of cities. We heard about DeKalb, but there were many others. He held a number of patents. He did great work. He stood up for people with less authority. And of course, he loved to stir the pot. Eventually, he decided he wasn't cut out to work for others. He told me he always made trouble and he was too annoying. And he and Sydney worked together as headhunters for 20 years. Here, he made his own decisions, with Sydney as an equal partner. He loved his work and he was good at it, earning top awards for many years, and making extra calls from vacations or losing track of time because he so loved his work. When Cheryl was in high school, this was a recent confession, she would call her dad at work when it started getting late and warn him quietly, "Dad, do you need to come home now? You'll be in trouble with Mom if you don't." Then John would look at the clock and scramble home, with Sydney none the wiser. And it wasn't just work. John remembered to live by doing the things he enjoyed, including reading both fiction and nonfiction. He loved James Patterson, and I understand, introduced Jake to James Patterson. It's pretty great to share books and their characters with your grandfather. He also loved to go to shows with Sydney at Playhouse Square and go to the movies. The two of them often took Friday afternoons off to go to the Cedar Lee where they could agree on movies to see. He loved food. He loved to eat. He loved to debate issues, especially with Tom. He loved to be with his family. He loved to travel. He and Sydney and sometimes Mike and Gigi saw the world together. They went to Alaska, to Mexico and China and Israel and all over Europe. John breathed in new experiences with a contagious feeling of joy. His personality was magnetic, and one of the ways in which he remembered to live was by reminding everyone else to do the same. He was outgoing and lovable, and wherever he went, he made friends. We've heard from some of them today. He even made unlikely friends in retirement. Part of his routine, and yes, he had a retirement routine, he was regimented about all kinds of things, by how he spent each day of retirement to how he loaded the dishwasher and expected you to do as well. But part of that routine was to have lunch at Einstein Bagels. There he struck up a conversation with a group of men and quickly turned strangers into friends. John termed them the Romeos, retired old men eating out. The Romeos met religiously for years. And as that dwindled, or as Einstein's closed, I wasn't sure which, he found two women out to eat, and he joined them on Saturdays for lunch. Anyone who met John was a friend. He had a way of listening and being present that made us all feel special. But more profound than all of this was John's attitude, which was a shrine to remembering to live. He lived a life of optimism, gratitude, and joy. He woke up every morning and greeted the girls and Sydney with the words, "Rise and shine," sometimes adding from the song, "And give God your glory, glory." And he meant those words. For John, every day held a commandment to rise and shine, to act joyously, to live large. His morning greeting was a lesson, and he never lost faith in that philosophy. Through 10 years of illness, John never felt sorry for himself, and he never stopped living. After he died, his financial planner, I told you everyone was a friend, wrote a beautiful note to the girls, beginning, "John was one of the most wonderful people I have ever met, always upbeat, happy, calm, and grateful for the life he had and the many more years medical science was able to add to it." The financial planner also said he never felt sorry for himself. What truthful words. At the Cleveland Clinic, days before transferring to hospice, John forced himself to eat and take walks so he wouldn't lose what strength he had. Last month, he made an eye appointment for June of 2018. We all know that Sydney is very upfront, and when she asked him why, he said, "I'm being optimistic." When he was in hospice, he repeatedly thanked the nurses for their wonderful care and said how lucky he was to be there. When I saw him in the hospital just after his birthday, I think it was the day after, John was so excited, despite being weak and in terrible pain. "I made it," he said. 73. I wanted to make it to 73. 73 years is pretty good. He got a taste of Sydney's cherry pie, his favorite, for that birthday, and for that, too, he felt genuine gratitude. Life looks really different when you can see it in this way. If you think too much about death, you forget to live. Amazingly, at the same time as John was optimistic, as one of his friends said, he was also a realist. In hospice, he told us it was his time. And he wanted to get smaller, and he used his hands. I want to get smaller and smaller and smaller and just go poof and disappear. And one day he awakened from his sleep, saw his daughter, and declared incredulously, "I'm still here? This is ridiculous. Am I on Earth?" I think John was frustrated at that point, but I also think he knew he was funny, because was he ever funny? No humor was too childish for John. Just ask the grandkids about all the silly stunts, like pretending to hit his head on the table, the fart machine. Who knew there was such a thing? And how many times he stole their noses. He watched the Three Stooges with the grandkids, held court and told jokes at family events, made Sydney and the kids and grandkids laugh all the time, and always had a quick retort. As Sydney said, he had no pride. He would do anything for a laugh. Temple folks, we will always remember the wig, the coconut bra, and the grass skirt that he wore as he belted out Right Mistress, a parody of White Christmas, on Purim. And we'll cherish the photo of Norman Demby's hands lovingly holding the coconuts. We will also remember his PG-13, and if we're honest, his R-rated questions at adult education. His knack for making me laugh in the middle of High Holy Day services. His huge smile and his contagious laugh. If he were here now, he would find something to joke about. His smile filled the room, and he made sure everyone else's did as well. What he smiled most about was his family. He always kept in touch with his brother Michael and with Gigi. I often heard about trips the couples took together, and he always appreciated those times. And of course, he couldn't get enough of the grandkids. I think the only time John and Sydney skipped coming to Temple, their devotion to Temple B'nai Abraham is a whole other story that I couldn't fit in. I think the only time they missed was to be with the kids. With Aaron nearby, they attended skating competitions, and John was so proud of everything Aaron did. He worked just as hard to see Jake, Sarah, and Leah, trekking to the Cincinnati area for competitions and just to be together. He played with the kids, joked with them, poured love on them, and most of all, enjoyed them. I think he might have been the bad influence on them instead of the other way around. Jake even left his overnight camp to be here today because his grandpa meant so much to him. John, by the way, was so happy that Jake and the girls would go to camp and have some of the experiences he had. He couldn't get enough of the 4 grandchildren. Elaine and Don and Cheryl, and I just flipped your spouses, and Tom, but we'll let you keep your spouses as they belong. Dad felt the same way about you. When you have rhyming spouses, that's hard to say. Every time I saw him, he had something to say about you, and his face got all soft and smiley as he said what was happening in your lives. He even had different ringtones on his phone, obnoxiously proclaiming who was calling. What you and your mom did for him in his final weeks was an heroic act of love. And Sydney, what a relationship. John and Sydney complemented each other so well and had an honest, open, energized, laughter-filled, joy-filled relationship. They respected each other's individuality and independence, supported each other, and connected deeply. Sydney, you've been superhuman in your care for John, and he was grateful every minute. You helped him live a good life, and when it was time to die, you helped him do that well also. We could say that John has been dying for 10 years since he got the cancer diagnosis and learned that it's a 10-year disease. But that wouldn't be the truth. The truth is that John lived for 10 years and had only been dying for about a month. He taught me, and I hope all of you, about grace, optimism, acceptance, hope, laughter, and perseverance. He touched me and all of you and changed my outlook on life. He reminded me and you that more profound than the injustice of suffering is the miracle of life. His life insisted that joy is greater than sorrow, that goodness is greater than suffering, that every day we have is truly a blessing. If you think too much about dying, you forget to live. Thank you, John, for teaching me, for teaching all of us how to live. Zecher Tzadik Livracha. May the memory of this righteous person be a blessing, and may it remind us to count our blessings. Amen. We take a few moments in our own hearts and minds to add our own memories to those we've shared as we pause in silent reflection. It was beautiful as long as it lasted, the journey of my life. I have no regrets whatsoever, save the pain I'll leave behind. Those dear hearts who love and care, and the strings pulling at the heart and soul, the strong arms that held me up when my own strength let me down. At every turning of my life, I came across good friends, friends who stood by me, even when the time raced by. Farewell. Farewell, my friends. I smile and bid you goodbye. No, shed few tears for me, for I need them not. All I need is your smile. If you feel sad, do think of me, for that's what I'll like. When you live in the hearts of those you love, remember, then you never die. We are those friends who held John up and who are responsible for seeing to it that he lives on through memory. With the prayer El Malei Rachamim, we pray with the image of asking the motherly presence of God to give John a hug, to embrace John in the presence of God. For those who are able, we rise for El Malei Rachamim. A little while back, Jay, who is another dear friend of John's, told me that somebody needs to chant El Malei Rachamim for John, and that if we're going to say goodbye to him, we're going to do it with a chanted El Malei Rachamim. And so Jay got to work, and he will be chanting for his friend.
El Malei Rachamim, Shochen Bam Romim, Hamtzeh Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei Hashkina, Im Kedoshim Udhorim, Kezohar Harakia Mazirim, Et Nishmat Hanshama Hazot, shehalach li'alamo. Ba'al harachamim, yastirehu b'seter kanafav li'olamim. B'tzror achayim et nishmato. Adonai hu nechalato. Ve'yanuach b'shalom al mishkavo. V'nomar, Amen. O God, full of compassion, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest under the wings of your presence to our loved one, John Brunschwig, who has entered eternity. Master of mercy, let him find refuge forever in the shadow of your wings, and let his soul be bound up in the bond of eternal life. The eternal God is his inheritance. May he rest in peace. And let us say, Amen.